Tucked into a canyon in the Davis Mountains of far west Texas sits one of the most significant and most overlooked historic sites in America. This is Fort Davis. It was a U.S. Army post that operated from 1854 to 1891, protecting the road that carried immigrants, mail coaches, and freight wagons across the brutal Trans-Pecos frontier. But what makes this place truly extraordinary isn't the fort itself, it's the men who served here. After the Civil War, the U.S. Army sent its newest regiments to this remote outpost. These were the Buffalo Soldiers, and this was one of their homes. Now I'm going to walk you through this site here at Fort Davis, show you what to expect when you visit, and tell you a few interesting stories that I bet you never knew about.
We have arrived to Fort Davis National Historic Site. Now this is one of the premier examples of a military post in the late 1800s. And they have an entire site here filled with all kinds of different buildings. It's in really good condition. And what I read is on certain holiday weekends and certain times during the year, they even have people in period, clothing that reenact things here at this site. So it's a cold, brisk morning here in January, but we're going to go check out what this site has to offer. It looks like a really interesting place. Very well done.
Your first stop is going to be the Visitor Center, and it's genuinely worth your time. The exhibits here tell the full story of the fort, the Buffalo Soldiers, the Apache campaigns, and the remarkable individuals who served here. You can pick up a self-guided tour map before you head out. The site covers a lot of ground, and there's also several hiking trails. You can find maps for that here too. Behind the Visitor Center, you'll walk through this building full of really interesting cannons and artillery that was used here. So let's learn more about these Buffalo Soldiers and why they were brought here. Well, in 1866, just 1 year after the end of the Civil War, the United States Congress passed legislation that allowed African American men to serve in the peacetime regular army. And there were 4 regiments that were formed: the 9th and 10th Cavalry and the 24th and 25th Infantry, many of which were formerly enslaved men that stepped into uniform for the first time. But all of them were stepping into a country that was still deeply, violently divided about whether they deserved to be there. They were given the oldest horses, the most worn-out equipment, assigned to the most remote and dangerous post on the frontier.
The squad room during the summer of 1884, 26 men slept, dressed, relaxed, and worked. The mess hall and kitchen were on the east side of the barracks. There was little privacy in barracks life. Wow. The mess hall and kitchen were right here. These are the original ruins. So in the Visitor Center, they'll take you through a map of all the structures that were here in this area. And all the buildings are original. Now they've been, the Visitor Center, you can see the remnants of the original adobe structure, but it's been replastered and made into a Visitor Center. But the framework of all these structures are original. And then there's a handful of these buildings where they've put the period furniture inside so you can see what it was like back in the day. So there's something like 4 miles of hiking trails, and they do go all around, and some of the trails go up on this hill where you can kind of overlook the site. I don't believe we're going to have time for that today, but just so you know, you can make a whole day of it. There's a lot to see here.
So when I was researching this video, I wondered, why were they brought here? Why were the Buffalo Soldiers assigned to Fort Davis? Well, first of all, the Army needed bodies. That's most likely why Congress authorized this move. It was a necessity needed to fill the ranks.
Now this is the commissary between 1883 and 1891, and it looks like we can go inside. And don't let your kids climb on the wagon. That is cool. Let's go inside here. Okay, here's what it looked like. There's the building we're in right now. Next door was the bakery. There was a granary in the back. Granary or granary. Look, they've got remnants of the dishes. Some items were found under the floorboards. Doll fragments, many pieces of plates. Interesting. And what do they have back here? That's what it looked like. You'd stop in the store, buy your supplies. Succotash, hominy. This is the issue room. Imagine being hungry and walking into this room. You might be overwhelmed by the numerous enticing aromas. Everything in sight, from bacon to cheese to tobacco to apples and onions. Almost everyone living here got their food supplies here. Oh, I missed it. Oh, do you hear the bugle? That's what it was like back in the day. Time to wake up, everybody. So this is the old quartermaster storehouse. And that's the granary over there. And there's a couple other structures here. I believe these were the stables. They had some horses. But there was some signs saying that the horses were not. They didn't want people interacting with the horses right now. This is the granary and one other building over there. So now we're going to head to the other side, to some of the houses on the other side of the property.
And these frontier posts in far west Texas were among the most remote, most dangerous, and most uncomfortable assignments in the entire Army. So then why would these African American men enlist? Well, for many of these men, the Army offered something genuinely rare in a post-Civil War America. They had a wage, they had structure, and they received a degree of dignity. It was an opportunity for economic and social advancement. They earned $13 a month, along with food, clothing, and board.
The nature trails start here, and we just found like two big groups of, well, I'm calling them mountain goats. I'll have to look up and see exactly what the species is, but what a beautiful area. All of these here are the officers' quarters. And so one of them, you can see what the officer's kitchen looked like. And then they have two other buildings that have been restored with furnishings of the period.
Let me tell you a story about one of the men that lived here in the officer quarters. His name was Henry Flipper, and his story is quite impressive. This man was born into slavery in Georgia in 1856, but by 1877, he had done something no African American had ever done. He graduated from the United States Military Academy at West Point. 4 brutal years of being isolated, harassed, and ignored by fellow cadets, and he didn't quit. He became the first African American commissioned officer in the regular U.S. Army. He fought with distinction in the Apache Wars. He was brilliant, an engineer, a surveyor, a scholar, and he was stationed right here and lived right here in these officers' quarters. It should have been the crowning chapter of an extraordinary life. But his story takes a very different turn.
The amount of preserved properties here at Fort Davis is really, really remarkable. I'm very impressed with the amount of properties here and the condition that this site is in, and the wildlife and the trails. So this place is definitely worth your time.
This is the remains of the Fort Davis Chapel, and this is where one of the most troubling chapters in the fort's history played out. I spoke earlier about Henry Flipper and what a remarkable figure he was. Well, when a new commander arrived at Fort Davis, Colonel William Shafter, everything changed. Shafter openly resented having a black officer under his command, and within days of arriving, he stripped Flipper of his quartermaster duties without cause. They ordered him to keep government funds in his personal quarters rather than the fort's safe. Well, this was a setup, and when the money went missing, he was the only suspect anyone was looking for. Right inside this building, this simple, modest chapel, a court-martial was convened against Henry Flipper in 1881. They found him not guilty of embezzlement. This charge simply couldn't be proven, but that wasn't enough to save him. He was dismissed from the Army anyway on the lesser charge of conduct unbecoming of an officer. Flipper fought to clear his name, and he has a pretty impressive career history. He was a mining engineer, a property lawyer, a translator, an assistant to the Secretary of the Interior. He was brilliant in everything he turned his hand to, but this discharge followed him everywhere. He died in 1940. In 1976, the U.S. Army reviewed his case and changed his discharge to honorable. And on February 19, 1999, President Bill Clinton granted Henry O. Flipper a full and unconditional pardon.
I think they made this one look like what it did back. Yeah, so the commanding officer quarter. This is what it was like for the man in charge, where he lived.
The highlight.
Huh?
This is the highlight that Ritzy people are doing. We get one bath a week.
Oh yeah, she was talking about how they did not even want to bathe once a month, the soldiers that worked here. Now, that's probably another bad reflection. I'll have to take a photograph. They were telling us that the ladies that worked here made $1 for every set of clothing that they washed for the soldiers. I think they needed to be washed once a month, and they were some of the wealthiest residents in the area. When the bugler sounded sick call in the morning, sick and injured soldiers reported to the post hospital, and that's that up there on the hill. So we're going to go check out the post hospital. She said they have a lot of examples of a lot of the old surgical devices that they used to use back in the day. Far removed from the living quarters. Tonics, stimulants, and purgatives. In the 19th century, many doctors believed that poison in blood and tissues caused disease, and to purge the body of these evil substances, they treated patients by bleeding them and giving them enemas. However, as the 19th century progressed, the use of these treatments diminished.
To the threshold, you're walking through. The curious mind sees it walking up, like, what's in there? And then when you walk through, oh,
The original bones of the structure showing here, and there's a lot of displays here about, you know, the different kinds of tools that they used here and how many people lost their family. Now this is a sign they are restoring the hospital, so there's a future project in the works. Your fee dollars at work. Here's another, this looks like a surgical room with surgical instruments and a table here. Kind of scary. They either died or they got over it. This is the hospital steward's room. With a little display here. These were the real patients at Fort Davis, diagnosed and treated with 19th century instruments. There's John Bell in the 10th Cavalry. He was suffering from an earache. Oh, they used an ear spoon. They had a mixture of opium, glycerin, and water. It was poured into the ear with an ear spoon, which is this right here. So this is a fascinating display. This guy swallowed a piece of bone. I don't know how that happened. And it's lodged in his throat. Oh, like chicken bone or something maybe. The post-surgeon used a probang to pull the bone out of his throat. Figure 7. Where's that at? Is it that's not that. It's not 7? That is 7. Oh my God. That's terrible.
Endoscopy.
Terrifying, yeah, old school endoscopy. This guy suffered from acute dysentery and is hospitalized. I think that disease, oh, here we go, an enema kit. Figure 3. Doesn't that look lovely? Right there. "12 beds were in this ward, and right now it's housing a wagon." If you're enjoying this tour of Fort Davis, don't forget to leave a like. And if you're interested in more videos in the West Texas area, then you're going to want to watch this video right here. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.